So His Grace Mahatma Prabhu, is a very dedicated disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he met Srila Prabhupada at a very, very early age of 19. And shortly after meeting Srila Prabhupada, after a year, he joined the temple. And since then, he has been doing many, many services in the movement for the welfare of so many devotees and so many people across the world. He's been a book distributor, a Sankirtan leader, temple president of many temples. He's done a lot of college preaching. He's done a lot of congregational development and also many educational projects. And today we see that, he has very innovatively created so many relevant workshops on social media and so many courses that are available online. And he's also publishing such beautiful books on, japa, relationships, and devotional service under his company called Sattva, the Sattva.com. And he offers so many practical solutions in a very Krishna conscious way that meet today's challenges. And he speaks in a way that, the modern society can connect with. Right? And Prabhuji is not only, known for his talks, but he's also known for his amazing music that he creates, the beautiful devotional music that he creates. And he's, renowned for his recording of the Brahma Samhita, which most of you may have heard. And Prabhuji has been doing a lot of workshops, especially on japa, forgiveness, humility, marriage, all across the world. During Corona, this pandemic, he's been doing a lot of online workshops for the benefit of so many people around the world. He and Mataji, his wife, Janava Mataji, they live in Alachua, Florida, and they have a very nice daughter, Braj Sundari, who has finished her college and travels. I'm not updated as to what she's doing now.
Right now, she's dressing the deities right at this moment.
So Jai, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So I have the very good fortune of getting Prabhuji's association when I was attending college at the University of Texas at Austin in 1994. So Prabhuji is like, he's an instructing spiritual master for me. My initial days in Krishna consciousness were spent in his shelter and, Mataji, Mother Janvar's shelter. And they really nurtured and guided, me in the process of devotional service. So my initial nurturing was done by Prabhuji and Mataji in Texas. And I still remember one incident that happened, which really moved me. I remember I had borrowed this book after going to the center for 2 years. I borrowed this book called The Six Goswamis of Vrindavan, written by, Satyaraj Prabhu, Stephen Rosen. So I borrowed that book from Prabhuji and I read it. And when I came back, I said, Prabhuji, I really love this book. So then he looked at me, with a lot of compassion and so much encouragement. And he says, this book is for devotees. And for the first time, I felt that, there's a chance that I could also be a devotee, So I still remember the incident. And of course, there are many, many incidents. I remember when I first went to the center, there was no furniture. This was the first time I'd gone to anyone's home. Right? Prabhuji and Mataji were living and there was no furniture. It was such a mind-boggling experience for me that you go to someone's house and you don't see any furniture, and they were so renounced, and they were living there as a grihastha, but all their time they were giving to preaching, and that was something that had a very deep-rooted effect in my consciousness, that you could be a grihastha but still do so much seva. So actually seeing Prabhuji and Mataji's example, even today, like I still remember that how dedicatedly they were preaching. Even though they had come, they didn't have much financial resources. They were so dependent on Krishna's mercy, but their enthusiasm to give Krishna consciousness in a very difficult place in Austin, that really touched my heart. So Prabhuji, I'm so delighted to welcome you to address the congregation in Gurugram on such a very relevant topic, of connecting with the spiritual master. So on behalf of our temple president Ram Bhadra Prabhu and all the congregation and the temple management, I wholeheartedly welcome you to today's session, and let us all raise our hands and loudly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, unmute ourselves and chant the Hare Krishna Mantra for the pleasure of
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
So thank you very much. We will hand over the session to you now. Very good.
Our daughter's initiated Shama Mandali.
Oh, Jai. When was that?
That was maybe 3 years.
Yes.
No, 4 years, I think. She got initiated young, and then second initiated. That it's 20 to 5 right now. That's why I said she's on the altar.
Okay.
Twice a week she addresses the deities, but she still hasn't finished university. She got bored, so she just traveled. Anyway, we're working on that. So, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanivari Paschati Satanine Mukam Karati Vachalam Pangu Langayate Girinya Krapa Tamaham Bande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Jaina Bhutale Shayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakapa Trubhyascha Krapashandubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvaita Gadadhar Shvashari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. It's nice to see all of you. Happy to be here. Hope you're all well. And it's always a pleasure to speak about connecting with the spiritual master. And of course, for all of us, that means if we understand Srila Prabhupada's desire, that of course is the desire of every spiritual master in the Hare Krishna movement. So we start there, and I specifically chanted this verse, Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam, the heart and desire of Lord Chaitanya. When, Rupa Goswami is saying, when will I understand the heart of Lord Chaitanya? And really, that's the duty of the disciple, to understand the heart of the spiritual master. early on in the movement, some interesting things were happening. And probably you wouldn't know this if you weren't there. But we would generally, I think you would all generally assume that whatever happened when Prabhupada was here was directly under his direction. And that's true in many cases, but not in every case. In many cases, projects were developed not directly under Prabhupada's direction, indirectly by a disciple who could understand the heart of Prabhupada. And even though Prabhupada didn't give a specific instruction, they understood Prabhupada must want this project, or Prabhupada must want me to do this, or he must want me to behave in a certain way. And so they went and did it. And in fact, the first Gurukula, which was established, was in the United States. And the way it was established was that a devotee was reading in Prabhupada's books about Prahlad Maharaj and the importance of educating children from an early age. And he thought we should have a school for children because children should be educated in Krishna consciousness. That's actually how the first Gurukula started. It wasn't that Prabhupada said directly to this devotee, establish a school. But he said in his books that children need to be educated. And so the devotee thought, oh, Prabhupada must want a school. One time, Srila Prabhupada was with Giriraj Swami. And those of you who know Giriraj Swami, he's a very deep thinker and very, very dedicated, probably one of the most dedicated people to Srila Prabhupada, which is why Prabhupada loved him so much. And so he was sitting with Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, in studying your mission and trying to understand you, it seems like the two things you're really focused on are book distribution and building Mayapur. Like, you know, there are many, many things, but these were like the two most important. And Prabhupada said, yes, you've understood correctly. So that's an example of a disciple studying the spiritual master and trying to understand what is in the heart of the spiritual master. Now, of course, the spiritual master usually will tell you what's in his heart and what he wants. But the problem is that we don't always hear what he says. I mean, the ears hear it, but it doesn't always register. So I thought I would perhaps emphasize some things that I think all the spiritual masters in ISKCON want because they were emphasized by Srila Prabhupada. And no matter who your spiritual master is or will be, these are things that he would support aside from individual spiritual masters who may have specific desires. Before I do that, I want to highlight Srila Prabhupada's example of dedication to his guru. As you know, Prabhupada got the instruction to go to the West, I believe it was when he was 23 or 24, or I was young. Anyway, he was, in his own words, newly married with 1 or 2 children. So he couldn't do it. And he finally was able to leave India in 1965. So that was a long time after he heard that instruction. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but generally, at least what I've seen, is that when we get an instruction, we often forget the instruction unless our authority or spiritual master reminds us that it's important. It's like, well, you know, I was given this instruction, I couldn't execute it for a few years, and I tend to forget the importance. Well, it must not be that important. My Guru Maharaj didn't say anything. I don't know if any of you have that experience. Well, right now he talked about book distribution, but now he's talking about farming. So book distribution must not be that important. It's not like that. And And I always found it such an incredible inspiration that Srila Prabhupada had to wait most of his life. He came when he was 65, so he waited for 40 plus years before he could fully execute that instruction. So that was most of his life, was waiting. And, for the ordinary person, you would think, well, I wasn't able to execute that instruction, and now I'm 69 years old. So, it's too late, isn't it? Isn't that how most people would think? He gave me that instruction when I was young, spent my whole life raising a family. I couldn't do it. So just go to Vrindavan and chant and read and live the last years of my life peacefully. That's generally how people would think. It's so amazing that Prabhupada didn't think that way. It's as if that instruction was as alive in his heart as the moment he received it, isn't it? And I don't know if you know this, but Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada's godbrothers, some of them had mentioned that although Srila Bhaktisiddhanta specifically asked Srila Prabhupada to come to the West, that was an open instruction for everybody. It was not just for Prabhupada. He wanted anyone and everyone who could do it to do it. It's so interesting that he was the only one to do it. And I think it sheds light on the fact that to understand the heart and mind of the Guru is difficult, and even perhaps more difficult to execute that desire, because sometimes that desire is difficult, inconvenient, seemingly impossible. And you may be aware of this. It may be evident from Prabhupada's prayers, Markine Bhagavat Dharma, but Prabhupada did not really think he was going to be successful. He seriously doubted that he would be successful. That is definitely clear. Before Prabhupada went to the West, right before that, he went to Mayapur, and he was crying, chanting and crying, and at the temple of Nandan Acharya in Mayapur, where the home of Nandan Acharya, there's a temple, and so the Pujari said, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "My spiritual master has given me an impossible task, and I am unqualified to do it." Of course, who's qualified for an impossible task? So that's a bit redundant, but that was Prabhupada's feeling. And here Prabhupada is embodied an instruction he got 40 plus years before to execute an impossible task, and he's doing it. And that can only mean he deeply understands the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. What else could it mean? I mean, we glorify Prabhupada. It's not that we offend his godbrothers, but we glorify him amongst all his godbrothers for doing what they were all instructed to do, or they all knew that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted that. When I read the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, I had the same realization, because the things that Prabhupada did in ISKCON, essential things were learned from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and he was just copying them. He was just doing them because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did them. And sometimes he didn't know if this was necessarily the best preaching strategy, but he just did it because this is what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did. One of the things that Prabhupada did was of course, book distribution, that's obvious. That was the specific order of Bhaktisiddhanta to write and publish books. And Prabhupada said, I don't know the result of book distribution. I just know that it will make Srila Bhaktisiddhanta smile. It was actually asked the devotees, why are we distributing books? And the devotee said, well, of course, to educate people. And he said, no, we're doing it to make Srila Bhaktisiddhanta smile. He said, I don't even know. We don't know the result. We just know that he's pleased. Of course, sometimes Prabhupada said by book distribution, the world will be Krishna conscious. But at other times he said, We don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. This is what Bhaktisiddhanta wanted. And so we know if we do what he wanted, we'll be successful. Another project you may not be aware of, or all of you may not be aware of, is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to have huge diorama exhibits, and he would take them from town to town. And they'd have these big festivals. And so Srila Prabhupada did the same thing. He sent some of his disciples to India to learn doll making in Bengal. And then they came back, and in Detroit, they created a museum. In Los Angeles, they created a museum. And actually, the idea was they would create museums in every single temple. And why did Prabhupada do that? Because that's what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did. And there are many, many other things that I found that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did or said that Prabhupada perfectly represented. And so by reading the life of Bhaktisiddhanta, we really see the oneness between Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, that Prabhupada really understood his heart. And I think one of maybe the greatest examples of understanding his heart was kind of what we could call in ISKCON a famous conversation where Prabhupada said that Bhaktisiddhanta said there would be fire in the mat, and if you ever get money, print books. And we know Prabhupada followed that to the T. He followed that. And Prabhupada allowed the BBT to loan temples money. I don't know if you're aware of this, but and temples needed to refurbish their temples, or sometimes to buy a temple, he would loan money. And so whenever there was a discussion of loaning money for temple refurbishing or purchasing, if that money, if the money that the BBT had was needed for printing, then Prabhupada would say, no, okay, forget the loan, printing first. Always printing first. Bhaktisiddhanta's instruction. If you ever get money, print books. So Prabhupada, he stuck to that. And so we see, if we understand Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his life, his preaching, his instructions, we see Prabhupada. He was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Manobhishtam. He understood the desire. That was his example. So, as I mentioned, I wanted to talk about what I feel is one of the most important desires of every spiritual master, and Srila Prabhupada's desire. Srila Prabhupada said something amazing, and I don't think all of you have heard this. In fact, I only recently came across it. And Prabhupada said, the essence of this movement is cooperation. That is an amazing statement, isn't it? Because if I asked you, what is the essence of the movement? If I said, the essence of the movement is, we could come up with many things, and I don't even know if we would at all even come up with this. Essence of the movement, be Krishna conscious, distribute books, open temples, etc., etc. And here, Prabhupada saying, the essence is cooperation. And so, I can definitely speak on behalf of every spiritual master in ISKCON that this is one of their biggest concerns. Will the devotees in ISKCON work well together into the future? So why did Prabhupada say the essence is cooperation, and why are the leaders of ISKCON extremely concerned about our ability to cooperate or our inability to cooperate? If you know the story of Gaudiya Math, after the demise of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he said, form a governing body commission. Traditionally, that was not done. Governing body commission was actually taken from the Indian Railway. They have a governing body commission, so it was embodied after that managerial structure. Sometimes Prabhupada said things like, study the Catholic Church, see how they manage. How are they managing Tirupati? See how they're doing, So this was taken from, as far as I was told, it was taken from the Indian Railway. And traditionally, a guru would appoint the next acharya, and that would be the person who is in charge of the institution. And of course, as you know, there was no international Vaishnava institution. And whenever Prabhupada was asked who will be the next acharya, he said, anyone, all of them. I will not appoint one. I've appointed GBC, they will manage, and anyone who is qualified, they will lead. And so when Prabhupada said cooperate, he's coming out of the history of an organization that fell apart because they couldn't cooperate. And therefore Prabhupada's saying cooperation is the essence. So that's a powerful mantra, isn't it? A Mahabhakya from Prabhupada that maybe has gone unnoticed. So I would like to start here because let me just give you a little history. I think you can understand this, but I just wanted to maybe underscore this. I'll use my life as an example. Prabhupada came in 65 and he established ISKCON in 1966. I came in 1969. So it was about I came in the fall of 1969. So it was 3 years after ISKCON became official. And I think when I came, there might have been 500 devotees in ISKCON, if that many, something like 10 temples or something, or 7 temples or 12 temples. And the largest number of devotees I saw gather was a few hundred. That was like like what we have here is like, a third of the movement when I joined. So we saw a very young movement and a very vibrant movement and a very dynamic movement. And every year the movement was growing and new projects were being established. More devotees being initiated. Even in 1970, Prabhupada was giving sannyas to men in their 20s. It was a very, very exciting time. And, I came to get my second initiation and I found out that 5 devotees had taken sannyas, all like in their late 20s or mid 20s. And that so-and-so has gone to this city to start a temple. So-and-so has gone to this country to start a temple. It was very dynamic. It was always things happening. From no temples to 108 temples in 12 years. So if you do the math, it's a lot of temples being opened every year, right? And like when I say I joined maybe 12 temples, and so that's 69, and then 8 years later, 108 temples. So things were always happening, everywhere, always growing. And of course, we had one spiritual master. So if there was any controversy, it was settled in one sentence. Prabhupada would say, it's this way, or it's not this way. And no need to discuss it further. It was very simple. About 3 years after Prabhupada left, some of our leaders had difficulty. And it was the first time in the history of ISKCON that we had such problems and that things started slowing down. We had never seen that before. We only saw increase every year. It kind of be like, if every year Google started disintegrating, it was like, no, that's not possible. How would that be? Microsoft, and it wasn't like there was a competing company. There was nobody competing with us. It was internal problems that had affected us. So we as younger devotees, and even as the next generation who joined in the 80s, we feel like ISKCON is a bit like our child because, I joined ISKCON and was 3 years old when I joined. So for me, ISKCON was like a younger brother in a sense, this is my younger brother. And I had dedicated my life to expanding ISKCON, maintaining and expanding. That's what I did my whole, I dropped out of university and that's what I did. And like Nitai was saying, and at some point in time we were preaching and we didn't know where money was going to come from, and but this is what we did. This is what we decided to do. And so all the spiritual masters, present spiritual masters now in ISKCON, all of your spiritual masters or spiritual masters you may accept in the future, were around at that time. So they nurtured that little baby. And if you're a parent, what it's like to raise children and how attached you are to their welfare, to their health, to their future. And I can say, and I can definitely speak for every leader in ISKCON, they are extremely concerned about their future, every single one of them. And concern means that they're concerned that the present state of ISKCON we may not have the level of cooperation that is needed to establish a movement that succeeds when all the Prabhupada disciples are not here. So I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying it's a concern. And so I think this is one of the most important concerns of every leader, that his followers, his disciples, the people he's guiding, whether he's Diksha Guru or Siksha Guru, that they will develop the humility to be able to work well together, even with people they disagree with. Of course, it's easy to work with people that we agree with, right? As long as you agree with me, I love you. If you don't, I don't like you, So the challenge is that, just like now, I'm in America and you're in India, and I can guarantee all of you who are my age, you had a completely different upbringing than I did. You were raised in an entirely different culture. I can't guarantee that if you're 20, you did, because the cultures are very similar now, or more similar than dissimilar, I think. But those of you who are my age, even I think 40, 45 plus, you were raised in a different culture. But I would say even those of you who are younger, there's so many cultural differences. And when we look at the same thing, we have different views on it, even though we read the same books, because they go through cultural filters. And it's subconscious. We don't even know it. And often because of these cultural filters, we disagree. And we fight over things that it's not necessary to fight over. There can be two opinions on something. So Prabhupada was so disturbed when devotees fight. It's like I can't. If anything disturbed Prabhupada, I think nothing disturbed him more than that. And in fact, it had disturbed him so much that at one point he said, "It's so disturbing, I can't even translate my books. It's just giving me a headache." Literally a headache and figuratively a headache. So much so that he was too disturbed to translate. Could you imagine? And so why is Prabhupada so disturbed? For this very reason. He's worrying about the future. Will we get along? When Prabhupada was in his last days, he was asking his disciples, will this movement go on? Can you maintain it? Can you expand it? At least maintain it. He was very concerned. He wanted assurance. Why was he concerned? We were young devotees. And he was also concerned, will you get along? So I think that's where we have to start in understanding the heart of the spiritual master. That's what he wants. And I think because I'm the spiritual master, I can speak from my own personal experience. When we see disciples getting along, when we see disciples getting along with everybody, not just their own God brothers and God sisters, but everyone, we feel like, not only do we feel happy, but we feel like, oh, I've done something of value. I've created disciples who will be valuable contributors to ISKCON because they know how to work well with everyone. Just like when you raise a child, right? If your child becomes a criminal, how do you feel? But if your child becomes a good moral, upright human being, and especially your child becomes a good devotee, you feel like so happy, so proud, isn't it? So this gives the spiritual master great happiness when he sees his disciples getting along well, despite their differences, learning how to understand other people, compromise when necessary, and developing the qualities which are necessary and the vision which is necessary to get along, and vice versa. When his disciples don't get along, it gives him great pain. There's no question. It gave Prabhupada great pain, and it gives the current gurus great pain. So if you don't remember anything else, just remember this one thing Prabhupada said: cooperation is the essence. Prabhupada gave the example that these sons wanted to massage their father. And so they were all fighting one another to get to massage him, and they were actually hurting the father. You know that story Prabhupada tells? Yeah. They all want a massage, which means to give the father pleasure, but they ended up fighting, no, I'll do it. And they were actually hitting their father while they were giving him great pain. So it's a good analogy, a good visual to put in our mind that in the name of service, we may be actually causing pain to our spiritual master. Last night, we did a program with about almost 400 devotees from China. With four of the leaders from China, we did a program together. And one of the reasons we did the program together is we wanted the devotees to see that we're all together. Why are you not all together? Because, well, I'm a disciple of so-and-so, so I only go to his classes. I only go to his programs. I'm a disciple of so-and-so. I only listen to him. And so we wanted to show, no, we want all of you to be together. It's one family. It's not, there are 100 gurus. It's not 100 families. It's one family. So we felt that was so important because there is always a tendency for sectarianism based on culture, based on project, based on who's your guru and so forth. And I don't think anything could be more displeasing to one's guru than that. And sometimes we do that in the name of service, isn't it? There was a story one of the Maharajas told about a disciple who told someone that Guru Maharaj is giving an initiation and you have an hour to decide. And if you don't decide in an hour, you may, who knows what hellish planet you may end up in. Who knows? I don't know what they said, but there was a lot of force there. And so that Maharaj, who was speaking about that, was saying, this is not what we want to create. This is not pleasing to your guru. This is actually creating more division, forcing people into to take initiation from a certain guru is not what your guru wants. But you might think it is out of lack of understanding. You may think, no, maybe that's service to my guru. So we need to be careful that we don't do anything that would cause division in our movement in the name of service. So I told the devotees that we should always monitor ourselves. Are our actions creating more unity or more disunity? Because sometimes you see something is wrong and you just can't deal with it or cooperate with it or participate in it. And that's understandable, but still ask yourself, are my actions now, whatever action I take, going to create more unity or more disunity? And I would say, if it's going to create more disunity, never do it. And you might say, but I may have to compromise my principles. But unity is a higher principle than your principles. At least that's a thought I would like you to meditate on, because Prabhupada said, cooperation is the essence. So that must be the highest siddhanta for us as an institution. Okay, so now I want to talk about book distribution and sadhana. a devotee asked Prabhupada, what pleases you the most? So certainly for this class, we would want to know that, right? And this devotee was a book distributor, and he was kind of priming Prabhupada, because Prabhupada sometimes would say book distribution is the most important activity. And Prabhupada knew that this devotee wanted him to say that, and Prabhupada did not want to say that, because it's not entirely true. So Prabhupada said, what pleases me the most is if you love Krishna. So sometimes we want to do something to please our spiritual master, and we will compromise other spiritual principles or compromise our sadhana. And so one thing you should know about Prabhupada, and it's very clear, and there are many stories to back it up, when he asked us to do something, he didn't infer not to do something else. And sometimes we think, oh, he asked me to do this, so he must mean I don't have to do that anymore that I was doing. And one time Brahmananda came to San Diego, and we had a restaurant. And at the exit of the restaurant, there was a refrigerator that had drinks. And so we offered him a drink. Said, well, do you want a 7-Up or a Fanta? And he said, I'll take both. Of course, he's big, so he can drink them easily. But then he told a story. He said, Prabhupada had asked me to do something new. So he said, I thought that because he asked me to do something new, he didn't want me to, he wanted me to stop doing what I was doing. So he said, Prabhupada, does that mean I should stop what I'm doing to do this new project? And Prabhupada said, just because I tell you to do something new doesn't mean I'm telling you to stop. You should do both, which is why he took both drinks. This, you want this or that? We'll take both. Prabhupada, should I do this or that? No, do both. So in the name of service that will please Prabhupada, we don't want to compromise our sadhana, which Prabhupada has told us to do repeatedly. If you read every letter of Srila Prabhupada, I think you would come up with 1, 2, 3, 4,000. Chant your 16 rounds, follow the 4 principles, rise for Mangalartik, clean, worship deity, spread Krishna consciousness, go on Sankirtan, like over and over and over again, beating us. So why? When the spiritual master, when he repeats something over and over and over again, we should know that he's doing that because number 1, it's important, and number 2, he's afraid we're not going to get it. So he keeps telling us. So just some experience, maybe you have the same experience. It's easier to do something than sadhana for most devotees. So we tend to like, okay, I put my beads down, I'll finish it later. We've got this big project I want to work on. It's not bad to work on projects. I'm not saying that, but it's a common problem. So sadhana, loving Krishna, chanting good japa, all these things, extremely important. As we know, opening temples, distributing books, all of these things. But there's another thing we have to be aware of. And as I say, I'm talking about Prabhupada's desire because this universalizes the desire of any guru. You may know that at one point, devotees were leaving ISKCON. So Prabhupada said, all right, so we need to help the devotees. So now let's focus on helping devotees instead of making new devotees. And he gave the example, and you boil milk, it becomes thicker and sweeter. So he said, now it's time to boil the milk. And that was the analogy of strengthening the devotees we have. And sometimes Prabhupada gave the example of an army. I think it was perhaps Alexander the Great. He'd conquer a country, then he'd go on to conquer another country, and he'd lose the country he had just previously conquered. So Prabhupada was afraid that that could happen. So being Krishna conscious is definitely, look at it from your spiritual master's perspective. He is instructing you to become Krishna conscious. his job is to get you back to Godhead. That's his job. And as I say, when I initiate devotees, I say, my job is to get you back to Godhead. Please don't make my job difficult. Make it easy for me. And how do you make it easy? You follow, you follow those instructions of the Guru, especially around having a regulated sadhana, around chanting without offense, around studying Prabhupada's books, cultivating Krishna consciousness. Okay, now, I think I have to stop soon for questions. Is that correct? Nitai, is that? Giriraj, what time am I supposed to stop?
Prabhuji, you can speak for more 10 minutes and then we can start the questions.
Yeah, okay. I totally forgot what I was just going to say. All right, so I have to rewind the tape. So we're speaking about sadhana. We're speaking about book distribution. Speaking about boiling the milk. And they were speaking about going back to Godhead. So what obviously makes a spiritual master happy is when he sees his disciple is advancing, because the spiritual master accepts a disciple to help them advance. So if they're not advancing, it's very concerning to the spiritual master. And if they are doing well, then spiritual master is very happy. Now, if you look, we unfortunately have, although we have Prabhupada's letters, we don't have the letters that he's replying to. And certainly he's replying to problems. But generally, when we wrote Prabhupada, we would want to write letters of what we're doing. Prabhupada, I'm doing this, I'm establishing this program, I'm chanting my rounds, I'm doing this. We didn't like to write letters to Prabhupada. Obviously, Prabhupada, I'm having a hard time chanting my rounds and struggling to follow the principles, and I don't feel like doing any service, and I can't get along with the temple president. You know, those are more common letters that I get today. Then I just opened a new temple. It's like, I don't want to work with anybody. Those, I get more of those letters. So obviously these are real problems. And sometimes we write our spiritual master because we're senior devotees or 6 gurus because we want to get help. But from the point of view of the spiritual master, he exists to get you back to Godhead. So when he sees that you're having difficulty extricating yourself from the modes of nature, you're having difficulty in your service, in your sadhana, and getting along with others, it's concerning. He's very happy to see that you're doing well. And so one thought I could plant in your head was, if you just, like tomorrow morning, you chant really good rounds, that's an amazing service to your spiritual master. He's so happy. Don't ever think that whether your rounds are good or not has no connection with the pleasure you give to Prabhupada or your spiritual master. It definitely does, that simple act. Or don't ever think that if if there's a disagreement and you make some compromise, or you did something wrong and you apologize, don't ever think your spiritual master is not overwhelmingly happy when you do these things. He is, because he sees that you're making advancement, and that makes him happy. Do you know that when Prabhupada visited a temple, and he visited many, often, sometimes every 3 days he would go to a different temple, that often when he arrived, everyone would go in the temple room, and Prabhupada would give what was as later named by the tape ministry, or the I don't know what they even call it now, because in those days we had tapes, called it the tape ministry. Prabhupada, it was described as Prabhupada's arrival address or arrival lecture. You'll see that if you look at Prabhupada's lectures. And in many of those, Prabhupada asked the question, are you happy? Which definitely indicates to us that the spiritual master is very concerned if you're happy. So if you can figure out how to be happy in Krishna consciousness, that's going to make him happy. And I know many of us are challenged. Life is difficult. We're busy. We don't always have time to execute our sadhana well, et cetera, et cetera. But the more you can do to nourish yourself, and maybe this sounds like a paradox, that the more you can be selfish, the happier your guru will be. And when you become selfish, it's at that point you will become more selfless, because as you're inspired by your sadhana, naturally you want to share it. And your spiritual master knows that. So he's not worried that you'll become selfish. He's worried that you'll neglect yourself and you'll neglect your sadhana. So I always think that if I am not living in a way that I'm progressing in my spiritual life, if I'm not living in a way that I feel like every week, every month, every year, I'm making sufficient progress in Krishna consciousness, I'm failing my spiritual master. Because 80 volumes of books to get me out of the material world and I'm still stuck in it, that doesn't look good, does it? You know, imagine you instructing your child 80 volumes of one instruction and they don't do it. Pretty disappointing, isn't it? And so Prabhupada has given us 80 volumes of books to extricate us from the material world, to detach us enough that we can execute devotional service in a way we'll progress. And you know, sometimes a devotee would just tell Prabhupada that I'm reading your books, and you would see how Prabhupada was so happy. Because who did he write the books for? Primarily us, you and me. And so you want to please your spiritual master? Yeah. Do your sadhana well, chant your rounds well, and read Prabhupada's books. Your spiritual master will be very happy. Now, obviously, your spiritual master, whoever that may be or will be, has many, many projects. And obviously, ISKCON has many projects. And so anything you can do to help those projects, anything you can do to help make another person Krishna consciousness, so your spiritual master will be so happy. But going back to the example of boiling the milk, sometimes we've seen in ISKCON that we've put more effort into, we put so much effort into bringing people into Krishna consciousness that we neglected our own devotees or even mistreated our own devotees. We showed more compassion to people outside of ISKCON than our own devotees. So in line with this idea of cooperation and boiling the milk is, you know, we have this devotee care project. So caring for one another when you see a devotee needs help and you serve that devotee, that is so pleasing to your spiritual master. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to throw this out to you, that those who are the greatest team players, they say, and this is just statistical research, are the people who are the most sensitive to other people. They can kind of feel what other people are feeling. And how can you feel what other people are feeling? Well, the more you become sensitive, the more you'll pick up on it. You'll just look at someone's face sometimes and say, Prabhu, is there something wrong? And you can see it in the face. Have you ever noticed that? You're with someone and you just feel, you look at them and say, something's wrong. I don't. And you ask them, Prabhu, it seems like, is anything wrong? Is there anything I can do? So being sensitive to the needs of devotees, sometimes we walk on the feet of devotees in order to do seva, right? So that is not pleasing to the spiritual master also, that not only do we care for ourselves, but we also care for others. As we care for others, of course, it helps us. But that's a very important part of our culture. So I think I will stop here. Oh, I also want to mention, I'm going to put something in the chat. We were talking about good japa, right? So some of you know that we started doing online japa retreats. And so I'm going to, if you would like to attend, I'm going to put how you can register in the chat. And that's going to be, I'll just put in the dates so you know. Yeah.
Guru
9th and
Maharaj,
10th.
I'm sorry for disturbing. I have the invitation. I can display it if you let me do that.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's the, okay. I have the, I'm just going to put the link here and the date and whatever else you put, you can put. That's October 9th and 10th. And I think it's going to be like 5 p.m. your time, and it's 2.5 hours. Yeah. So yeah, there's she's displaying the little ad there. So yeah. And I've given you the link. So we've done about 6 of these. And the response has been really good. So I would love to see you there if you'd like to come. So it's all online from the comfort of your home. And it's 2 days for 2.5 hours each, or 3 hours. So this will give you an opportunity to please your gurus by improving your sadhana. Okay, so I think we have questions now? Is that what we do now, or?
Yes.
Okay. So you could raise your hand, or put your question in the chat.
So there's one question that's been put in the chat. It says, Hare Krishna, thank you so much for the wonderful session. My question is, Guru Maharaj already departed and it's the 2nd year, but there is so much pain in the heart. I can't get through this. Yes, we all know when the spiritual master departs, one must serve more intensely. But I am trying, but still my eyes, there are tears remembering his words. I was aspiring, still not initiated, and don't know how I will accept another process again for initiation. So he's asking for she's asking for some advice.
Yeah. Having been in a similar situation, I can at least relate my own experience. When Prabhupada left, sometime after having experienced the pain of that separation, I would, in my madness, would think, I wish I had never met Prabhupada. That way I wouldn't have to experience this pain. Like it was that painful. Like, and of course the saying goes, when someone leaves you, rather than feel this kind of lamentation, rejoice in the fact that you actually had met them, which is kind of, what I think you all probably thought as soon as I said I was wishing I never met Prabhupada because of the pain, and you're all thinking, I wish I had met him. You met Prabhupada, you're so fortunate. So that's one angle of vision. We're lamenting the loss, but we could only lament a loss because we had the great fortune of the presence of the Guru. So in my experience, and I believe this was a pretty universal experience, it takes years and years to overcome the trauma. And I don't even know if you actually ever overcome it. There's a lot of talk nowadays with the creation of Karuna Care about grief, overcoming grief and trauma. And there's more awareness in the world of how so many of us experience trauma that affects us sometimes for our entire life. And every Prabhupada disciple was traumatized on November 14th, 1977. And I don't know if we've ever recovered or ever will recover, if we have recovered or ever will recover from that. And so, that pain of that separation is always going to be there. And it's not like there's a formula I can give you. It's like, oh, okay, here's the formula. You will just take shelter of another guru. What's your problem? Just take shelter of Prabhupada. These are all like the pat answers. But when you're traumatized, healing takes time. And there may never be a spiritual master like him that you may never see anybody that you say, well, he reminds me of him so much that I want to take shelter. They may not be there, but he is your spiritual master. And the fact that you didn't take Diksha from him doesn't minimize that relationship in any way. Diksha is more of a formality. And Prabhupada said, the relationship with the guru is a matter of the heart. Once you accept him and accept his words, that person's your guru. And of course, in ISKCON, we have given what everyone realizes now is way too much emphasis on Diksha and way too little emphasis on Siksha. Because the Siksha is what gets you back to Godhead, not the initiation is not what gets you back to Godhead. It's the constant instruction and the following of that instruction that actually leads you back to Godhead. So in that sense, the Siksha Guru is more important. Of course, most Diksha Gurus are Siksha Gurus. But in your situation, I wouldn't say that because you can't be initiated, that relationship would be any less than it is today. And that to think that in your life, your success will be to find someone who inspires you as much as Maharaj did. Maybe you won't. And maybe at some point, you will find someone who you have faith in and you'll take initiation and you'll tell that person, but my real faith is in Bhakti Swami. And the guru will say, yes, he's my Siksha Guru also. And it's my honor to initiate you on his behalf. If he were here, he would have done it, but he can't do it now. But he is your guru. So that's one way to process it. You haven't really lost him. And from my personal experience, I had difficulty understanding the statement that the spiritual master is always present or he's more present in his words. When Prabhupada left, I understood it intellectually, but emotionally, it was not my experience. I would say maybe after 6 years, I started to experience that. Because the only way I could associate with Prabhupada after he left was through his service and instructions. There was no other way. Whereas when Prabhupada was present, his association, personal association was available. And you felt it very strongly through his disciples because they were reflecting his light. So although we had some experience of him being present in his words and service, we were forced because after he left, that was the only way we could get the association. So gradually, I took more and more shelter in the service and instruction. And then I felt that closeness. So how do you take shelter in the service and instruction? I think for Bhakti Swami, probably there's no better thing than you can do than make Prabhupada your most important guru and cooperate. That's what he preached all the time. And if there are any temples or projects that he wanted or had started, you support them, you work for them, and you'll feel a connection. That's the best I can offer. Aside from that, the pain that you're feeling is the pain you're feeling. And there's, in a sense, not a whole lot you can do. It takes time. And I would say grieve as much as you need. Prabhupada said, when the spiritual master leaves, we should cry. One of Maharaj's aspiring disciples asked me to become his guru, and I felt like, how can I do that? That is like, it's like, I can't replace him. It's such an awkward thing for me. When he asked it, I felt, this is really awkward because I am not him. So it's even awkward for the Diksha Guru. And so certainly, at least for me, and I would think for all gurus who have to give initiation to his aspiring disciples, we would all feel like, no, he's your guru. I'm just helping you in your relationship with him. And how the relationship with that particular guru develops, it will develop, and it develops as it develops. It may never be the same as it would be with him. It may develop and become very, very close, very sweet. We don't know. We can't control these things, but grieving, lamentation, it's natural. We'll feel this way. But in feeling that way, you will actually come closer to your guru because you'll be thinking of him more. So it's a difficult time. I can't give any like panacea, like an aspirin for it, or maybe an aspirin temporarily. Maybe what I said might be an aspirin to you, but in the long run, it's going to take time. And I would pray and I would think and I would hope you will meet someone who will someday inspire you in a way that is similar to the way that he inspired you, or at least someone that is inspired by him so much that that person inspires you because he's so connected with Bhakti Swami. And don't forget, we're one big happy family, right? So your god uncles and god sisters, they are all your well-wishers, as is your guru, for sure. And we're all here to help you.
Thank you.
I hope that helps. Okay.
Guruji, there's another devotee, Surekha Mataji, you have a question you'd like to ask? You have your hands raised. Prabhuji, can we unmute her?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol.
My voice is clear?
Yes.
Prabhuji, I came in contact with ISKCON just 5 months before, but everything is going very smoothly. I started from 4 rounds of chanting only, but as I came to know that the 16 rounds are mandatory, I started to get up at 2:40 and complete rounds till 5:30, and afterwards I do my domestic duties. I read Bhagavad Gita regularly, but when I think intensively on this topic, I feel that how is it going too smooth in my life? I get afraid that it is just an excitement or there will be a sudden fall in my Krishna consciousness emotions, as my husband is a non-devotee and I don't know anything how to get initiated. I don't know anything. I always afraid about it, how to overcome this fearfulness.
Very interesting question. Certainly, when you have a goal as exalted as loving Krishna, there will be challenges, inevitably, but it doesn't mean there will be challenges that you can't overcome, or there's challenges will be so great that they'll even disturb you. The challenges are mostly internal, from our own conditioning, but the process of Krishna consciousness is more powerful than the challenges. So, it is true that sometimes in the beginning you have enthusiasm, like you're starting the race. So you've got a lot of energy, and 10 years down the road, it's different. It's true with anything, anything you may do. Maybe you want to do a movie and it's the first time and you're like, oh, I get to produce a movie. But the 10th time it might be like, oh, this is like so boring. I don't want to do this, So that can happen. But there's no obstacle that you will ever face in your spiritual path that the process that you've been given will not help you overcome if you execute that process properly. So the only real obstacle, Prabhupada said, is ourselves. And of course, Maya's job is to test us. So there may be some tests. And usually the tests come in Maya offering us a little bait, like sometimes she baits us with something. Oh, you always wanted this, here it is. Maya has all kinds of baits. So, but the real test, the real obstacle is ourselves, our own unwillingness. And so as long as you have a sincere desire, Krishna says, Nahi kalyana kaschid dorgatin tattagachati, you will be successful. Another thing I would say as a general instruction, if I were living in fear that Maya may come and take me away, probably that's what would happen, because I would be anticipating it, almost like waiting for it to happen. Oh, well, I'm going to put it on my calendar. People say after you've been a devotee 3 years, Maya's going to come. So I have it written on the calendar. Okay, in 2024, in March, Maya's going to come on this date, because that will be 3 years after I join. Of course, not a good way to think. I always like to imagine being more and more Krishna conscious every day, every year, every decade. I think that's the best way. And one encouraging thing Prabhupada said, I said, whatever problem you have, whatever obstacle you have, I can kick it out with one kick of my boot. All Maya I can kick out with one kick of my boot, provided you're willing to follow my instructions. So, the instructions of Prabhupada are our strength and our shelter. And if you stick to those, you will be successful. So the only challenge really would be whether or not you have the determination to stick to them. But if you do, and you continue the way you're doing, and you follow the process well, you'll be successful. There's no question. And maybe your husband will see that and he'll become a devotee also, eventually. And you can say, you remember 10 years ago when you said, I would give this up? Well, I'm even doing better now than I was then. This is a genuine process, and he'll see that. And he'll say, yeah, you're right. It must work. I'm seeing it work. So, of course, sometimes we become fanatically enthusiastic and then we give it all up. So that's why we have Prabhupada's books, to give us the proper guidance and understanding. So we're not just fanatically enthusiastic, but it's based in substantial philosophy and substantial practice. Is that okay? So yes, there's a verse, and the verse goes, Aham tarishyami duranta tamo param mukundangri nisheva shaiva. I will cross over the great ocean, tamo, the great ocean of darkness, by taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Of Mukunda. That's the confidence of a devotee. And the devotee says, why do I say this? Because this is what has been done in the past. Those who have followed this process have crossed over. So therefore, I'm confident I will cross over also, because I'm doing the same thing they did. This is how Mr. Patel made $1 million in America. I'm going to go to America. I'm going to do what Mr. Patel does. I will make $1 million also. It's not a problem. I know what he did. I can copy it. Something like that. As long as you want to do what Mr. Patel did, then, so. And I think we all do want to do what the great acharyas have done. We want to follow their footsteps. Okay.
Very much, Prabhuji. Another question is, how do we know that our love for Krishna is increasing or being reflected in our life? What is the parameter on which we can measure whether our love for Krishna is increasing or not?
Oh, there are lots of parameters. You have like 3 hours. I'll give you all the parameters. You can write them all down. But in one lecture, Prabhupada gave a general parameter, which was, your interest in Krishna is increasing, and your interest in material things is decreasing. In other words, the fever of material consciousness, of material life, is decreasing. That is easily observable. Also, if you study the Gita and you understand the symptoms of Tamagun and Rajagun, then and the symptoms of Sattvagun, Bhagavatam says that by hearing and chanting, Sattam Stita Prasidati, you become situated in Sattva, Rajas, Tamo, Bhava, Kama, Labha. So what goes away? Kama, Labha, Dayaschaye, etc. You know the etc. The mortal sins. You know, Catholics have the mortal sins. The Hindus also have it. Lobha, Kama, Krodha, Madha, Matsara, envy, and anger, and so. If we're advancing in Krishna consciousness, we'll start to notice the modes of nature of passion and ignorance are weakening their grip on me. The intensity is weakening. They might still be there, but it's like I can feel it, but it's not very intense anymore. That's one of the signs of coming to the mode of goodness. You know, something that used to upset me either doesn't upset me or it doesn't upset me to the point where I react in the way I used to.
Thank you very much.
I think, well, there's a couple qualities that may be overlooked, like how am I dealing with my family? How am I dealing with my coworkers, etc. Am I more tolerant with them? Am I kinder to them? Am I becoming more empathetic, compassionate, etc.? These things are often overlooked. And I'm going to tell you something scary, and just so you can note this can happen to you. That in studies, they found that in general, only a small percentage of people in religious organizations are more compassionate than people in the secular world. The startling, I don't know if this is true in India, but this, at least in the West, the startling reality they found is that people who consider themselves not so religious, more secular, in general are more compassionate than religious people. Religious people tend to be a bit judgmental and condemning, at least in the Christian religion. Or maybe in Islam, I don't know, probably also, right? Hindus less so. But it's just something to notice, you know, that when you become a devotee, you might start thinking, I'm better than other people. After all, I don't eat meat, I don't drink, I'm chanting the names of God, I'm better. So that's not humility, that's pride. So we want to notice these things. Be more aware. Have you ever thought you're better than others because you're a devotee? I think the answer for all of us is yes, of course. Look what I do. I get up at 4 o'clock. I don't. No, we're in a sense, our actions are better and we know more, but are we actually better? If we're becoming Krishna conscious, you will not think you're better. You might think you're more fortunate and you've got more mercy. But humility means to see the good in others and see where I need to improve myself. So these are some things to look for. Yes, you have more questions?
Yes, Prabhu, I have another 3. So we have Jagadish Ishwar Nimai Prabhu. You have a question you'd like to ask?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Jagadishvara Nimai Das. Disciple of Jayapataka Maharaj?
No, Prabhuji. I'm a disciple of His Holiness Param Puja Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj.
Yeah, I thought so, because it was with a name like that, it could be only one of those two, right? Creative. You get creative names when you have that many disciples. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, first thing is I just wanted to ask that, Prabhuji, were you present during the Jagannath Rath Yatra in San Francisco?
First Rath Yatra I attended was in 1970 in San Francisco.
Right.
And then probably every year up till 1976, I think, or 77.
And so Prabhuji, this year, were you there in the San Francisco Rath Yatra?
This year I wasn't there. I haven't traveled since COVID. I've been sitting in one place. I joined in Berkeley, which is right across the bay from San Francisco.
Right.
So
I do visit Berkeley Temple. And Prabhuji, I had a question. Sorry to interrupt. My question was that, how can I improve my chanting? Because Prabhuji, I don't feel satisfied.
Mm-hmm. There's only one way to improve your chanting. Come to my online Japa retreat, October 9th and 10th. One thing I learned from the first Japa retreat I attended, and also from attending other retreats, is that sometimes to improve something, you actually have to give it a lot of time and focus. Like the Japa retreats were like a week or more, or at least 5 days. And who's given 5 days? Like we started at 5 a.m. and we go to bed at 9 o'clock. So that's 16 hours a day. Who's given 16 hours a day for 5, 6, 7 days to their japa? Has anybody done it? Just focusing on hearing about how to improve your japa, learning how to improve it, and chanting based on what you're learning. That's an amazing experience. So that was a real transitional, pivotal point in my japa career after that. It made a very big impression. Like sometimes people will go to a seminar or workshop and they'll come back and say, I don't see the world the way I used to see it, or I don't see money the way I used to see it, or I don't see, it's a workshop on money, or it's a workshop on marriage or relationships. I don't see relationships the way I used to see them. I've got so many insights into how to improve my business, my relationships, or it's a self-development workshop. I've got so many insights about where I need to work on myself. So the japa was just like that. It was like it took that environment and time just to go into it. So you can attend a japa retreat, or you can, listen to lectures on japa, get books on japa, just really go deeply into analyzing what is the problem and what are the attitudes and consciousness that are necessary for you to improve. Sometimes it takes like shaking up, we've done it one way for so long. It's just the way we do it. If you study anything about biology and beliefs and habits and samskars, it's actually scary how conditioning works, because conditioning is not just mental, it's physical also. We're physically conditioned to do something. I think a lot of you may have this experience that as soon as you start chanting, your energy lowers. It's like you've had bad experiences with japa, and those experiences are actually in your body. And so just by touching your beads, your energy can lessen. I mean, it should be the opposite. And for many of us, it is as soon as we touch our beads, it's like we wake up, we're like, well, this is going to be amazing. I'm connecting with Krishna. But have you ever noticed you start chanting and you start yawning? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, Prabhuji.
It's like the same thing. If your wife says, can you take out the trash? You start yawning, right? Oh, I'll do it tomorrow, right? So some devotees, you say Sankirtan, immediately, they run away. Or as the joke goes, as soon as we hear Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, we fall asleep, Because I've fallen asleep in so many Bhagavatam classes, it's like my body's conditioned to as soon as the verse starts, I finish the verse and he starts speaking, I'm like, I'm asleep. So if you want to improve your japa, then you have to understand that, there's a lot of habits we've developed, bad ones, and they're deeply conditioned. So that's why sometimes a japa retreat is so important, because it can deal with that conditioning, because you have time. You're going over things, you're practicing, you're reconditioning, you're working on it. That's why we do different levels of japa. So we keep it going, because you need to keep it going. You need to keep reprogramming, reconditioning. So, but either you can do that in a japa retreat or you can do it on your own. But that's what you have to do. You have to actually reprogram good habits in. And that's, of course, the best way to overcome bad habits. And what I would say to all of you who want to improve your japa, you have to start with a mentality that this can be done and this is what I want to do. Because it's just like the question from, she disappeared. Sukera, was that her name? You know, that question, it's a little dangerous to think that if I'm not chanting well, this is how it's going to be the rest of my life. That kind of guarantees that it's not going to get better. So we have to both have the desire and the belief that it can be better, and then put that into practice by working on it. I mean, I could give you all kinds of japa hints, but that would take another 2.5 hours, which is the length of the online retreat's only 2 days, 2.5 hours. So it's a very condensed, it's 5 days condensed of what we learned in 5 days. So it makes it really easy. But I can tell you one thing, because I'm sure you want to know something. I'll tell you a couple of things just because you asked. Prabhupada said that if we're not chanting well, it's going to take a long time to become Krishna conscious. So that's the price you pay for not chanting well. It slows down your progress. It's not that you're not making any, but it slows it down. And many of us are chanting mechanically. We believe if we just chant 16 rounds, there's magic in the 16 rounds. So we just try to get them done somehow or other, rather than connect with the meaning of the holy name, connect with the mood of prayer, feeling Krishna's presence, and so forth. So what I've noticed is that some of us have ritual, we've embodied ritual in because of our religious practices growing up. And so if we have too much of that ritualistic mentality, and if we apply that ritualistic mentality to japa, then it becomes more like, I have to sit straight, pronounce properly, chant 16 rounds. It becomes more of a mechanical process. But japa is actually a connection, a conversation with Krishna, a relationship with Krishna, a prayer session with Krishna, opening your heart, a begging of Krishna for help. That's what it is. But we can easily make it well, sit straight, pronounce Hare Krishna, Krishna. And I did 16 and I'm good. And what were you thinking of? Oh, I was just thinking of sitting straight and pronouncing properly. All good things, but they're meant to just support the fact that you're trying to connect in a relationship. So that's something that is an important shift in how we approach the holy name. And then you have my book, Jabba Affirmations, that also could help you. I don't know if you've read it yet.
Prabhuji, can you kindly mention the name in the chat? I'll just note down the name and get the book.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. If you want to get it at your temple, you just let me know. We have them in Mayapur. We can ship them to you. It's also available on Amazon.
Okay, I'll get it from Amazon.
Yeah.
So, Prabhuji, could we have another 2 questions? Is it time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Father Sevan Prabhu, if you had raised your hand, are you still there?
I think Prabhu, he's dropped.
It's dropped, right?
Yeah.
Just 1 second. There's one more question on the chat. So he says, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, is it okay to select a spiritual master on the basis of the fact how much they cooperate with the movement? So how much he cooperates for the movement, even though some compromise may be required, rather than never compromise attitude. Please share.
Well, well, I'm going to broaden the question a little bit. Maybe answer it in a way a little different than what you're expecting. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I also believe in the Hari Bhakti Vilas and other places, it says that when a disciple is looking for a guru, he should live with that guru for a year and study the guru. And that also gives the opportunity for the guru to study the disciple. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says something quite interesting. And I don't know if you're aware of this or if you've heard this. He said, to see if they're compatible, and so compatibility sounds like a marriage, doesn't it? Let's do the astrology to see if we're compatible. And he's saying, well, let's live together to see if we're compatible. Of course, men and women don't live together before they're married to see if they're compatible, but guru and disciple, of course, this is traditionally the disciple would live in the ashram. But the word to see if they're compatible is very important because, if your nature is to be very cooperative and your guru's nature is like, this is right, this is what we're doing, I don't care what anybody says, that would create a problem for you as a disciple. And if as a disciple, you're no, we have to follow exactly the Siddhanta, this is what Prabhupada did, that's how your guru is, that would actually work for you. Although, it could potentially create problems if you're not careful, if you take that too far and you start condemning everybody. Yeah, so I was just reading a chat. She said that Japa link is not working. I don't know what to say. Nadia, can you figure it out?
Yes, Maharaj. Can you please give me your WhatsApp number or email and I will contact you. Thank you.
Maybe we can put it in your, send it out to all of you in some other form, the proper link. That link's not connecting.
Or I can give my email and the devotees can copy my email and send me the message.
Okay. I'm just trying that link. See what happens. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, that link works. The link I put in there works. Yeah. So I'll put it in again. It actually works.
So Prabhuji, there's one question that Prabhupada once replied to a disciple who asked if rather than Krishna, he would remember Prabhupada at the time of leaving his body. Could he return back to Godhead? Prabhupada thought for a few moments and said, yes. Is it true for us also? If we remember our Diksha Guru rather than Krishna, can we also return back to Godhead?
Next time I meet Krishna, I'll ask him. I think there's another way to look at this. I mean, the answer is yes. Because in answering that question, at least another time, Prabhupada said, well, wherever there is the Guru, there is Krishna. So, but, going back to Godhead, we have to look at Krishna consciousness as a relationship. So, relationships are not based so much on rules and regulations, are they? It's based on affection, right? So let us tell the story of, I think it was Mr. Seti, who was helping build the Juhu temple. And he didn't want to get initiated. He didn't feel qualified. And the devotees were encouraging him. And he went to Prabhupada and said, I don't feel I'm ready, or for I don't know the reason. I believe from the story that I've heard that he was chanting 16 rounds. And so externally he was ready. And Prabhupada said, his man had done so much service, and Prabhupada said, the man said, but devotees say if you're not initiated, you won't go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada said, your house is already built in the spiritual world waiting for you. As you are building houses here in Juhu for the devotees, Krishna is building there. And the way I always understood it was Prabhupada was arranging with Krishna to build him a house for his service. So the way I personally think is, what does Krishna want me to do? I will do it. And what Prabhupada wants me to do, I will do it. And if I go back to Godhead, I go. If I come back, I come back. But if I'm doing what Prabhupada wants, that's what I'm most concerned about. And because Ananyas Chintayantamam, that Krishna, he carries what you lack. So, from a very strict sense, we might think, oh, I'll never be Krishna conscious. I'll never go back to Godhead. How can I? I have so many material desires. I have so many obstacles, etc. But from another point of view, if I dedicate myself to Krishna and Prabhupada's movement, then I'm in their hands, and they'll take care of me. So, we want to become Krishna conscious. We want to go back to Godhead because that's what our spiritual master wants. He wants to liberate us. But beyond that is, okay, I give myself to the mission of Prabhupada, and then I'm not worried. Like one time Prabhupada said, you may forget Krishna at the time of death, but he won't forget you. He won't forget your service. Like Isa Upanishad, the devotees praying, don't forget what I've done for you. Well, you don't have to worry. He won't forget. So, and he may come to your mind, or he may remember you. So we're not so worried about those things. We're worried about, let me serve. Right? And Krishna, I have faith. Krishna will take care of me. I mean, I haven't met any devotees who are hungry. Krishna's taking care of all of us, right? If they're hungry, it's usually voluntarily. They're fasting on Ekadasi or something. But normally, right? Somehow or other, Krishna's, I dropped out of university. Somehow or other, here I am. I still get my 2 chapatis and a cup of dal every day. Somehow or other, Krishna's taking care of me. So that's our faith. So you don't have to worry in that sense about going back to Godhead. You just worry about pleasing Krishna and worry about developing a relation with Krishna. If you want to worry about that. And don't you think if you love Krishna and he loves you, he'll want you to come back? Yeah, he wants you to go back for sure. Jagadishwar, I'll tell you something that I think of when I chant japa. I think Krishna loves me unconditionally, and I don't love him unconditionally. And so a lot of times when I'm chanting, I'm praying, Krishna, I want to reciprocate with your love. Please help me reciprocate with that love. And that's really what japa is about. It's a reciprocation. It's an attempt to reciprocate, a prayer to reciprocate. You've given me so much, let me reciprocate. And so that's really what Krishna consciousness is about, essentially. So if I'm trying to love Krishna and doing my best, why would I have to worry about anything else? Right? At least that's how I think. Krishna, let me become qualified to love you. Let me become qualified to reciprocate. That's all I want. Let me become qualified to reciprocate with my spiritual master for all he's given. And whether I go back to Godhead or not, that's not really the main thing. The main thing is I want to reciprocate. And of course, I want to be with you. I want to serve you. But when you love Krishna, it's like, wherever you want me to serve, that's fine. It's not even a question anymore because there's love. Like if you fall in love with someone, right? You don't care where you live, what you do, as long as you're together, you're happy. For a while anyway. So, but as long as we're with Krishna, we're happy. Isn't it? I say Shiva Parvatam Panastumam. You know what's a really beautiful thought? We all have a problem. We can be happy without Krishna. That's a problem, right? Like, can you like read a novel or watch a Bollywood movie or eat a good meal and be happy? Probably. Or hear your favorite song. You know, something not connected with Krishna. Can you be happy without Krishna? That's a problem if you can be. For the pure devotee, they can't be, right? And if their misery causes Krishna happiness, they're happy. So that's pure bhakti. That's the level we want to come to. That I cannot be happy. If you give me everything in this world, if I can't use it for Krishna, it won't make me happy. It's just impossible. And if I have nothing, but I can please Krishna, I'm happy. That has to be. And so if I can please Krishna, I'm happy. I go back to Godhead. Who knows where I go, as long as I can do service. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, even as an insect in the home of a devotee, I'm okay, as long as I'm a devotee. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So we have 2 more questions that have come in. I don't know. So would you want to take them, or should we stop here?
We can take them because I don't get to see you all that often. So we'll just keep going. I'll try to be quicker in my answers.
Neelamji, you can ask your question. Neelam Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. When you were just talking about the Japa affirmations, I have read so many Japa affirmations written by you, so wonderful affirmations. So I have a question that while doing Japa, can we read the Japa affirmations, or should we go through them and learn them while doing chanting? It's my dilemma. I just think which is the correct way.
You can read them while doing japa, but you have to stop chanting and then read. And then the idea of the japa affirmation is just to create a favorable mentality for chanting. So sometimes it's helpful if you're having difficulty with the proper mentality. Stop, you can read an affirmation, imbibe that mood, and then begin chanting. And then put the book down and then begin chanting. That's the idea. Well, I'll give Jagat Ishwar another point. You're getting some previews of the Japa retreat. One of the problems that we have in developing good Japa, which is kind of a universal problem for anything, you have to be in the right mood to do it. And so you all know, if you're not in the right mood, it's really hard to do something. If you're an artist, a musician, a painter, IT man, whatever, if you just don't feel like doing it, it's like you'll just putz around your house, doing something else, trying to avoid it, isn't it? And when you start to do it, it's difficult. So a lot of times we begin japa and we're not in the right mood. We're thinking about, I got to do this at work today, or, just had this argument with my relative and it's bothering me, or I really have so much to do right now. I don't even have time to chant. It's not the right mood. So the Japa Affirmations book was written in order to help us create a mood which would more or less guarantee that our japa would be good. Because a lot of the problem we have with japa is just we enter with the wrong mood. We're just trying to get our rounds done, basically. So that's a very important aspect of japa. And what the success coaches say is that you win the game in practice. You don't win the game in playing it. You've already won it before you go on the field. Or that, TED Talk, it's not a great TED Talk when you get on stage. You've rehearsed it 100 times. It's a great TED Talk. If it's not a great TED Talk before you get on stage, it's not going to be a good one for most people, unless all you do is talk. You're a public, that may be, but that means you've practiced for, I've been talking for 50 years. So if I give a great spontaneous lecture and say, how did you do that? You didn't even practice. I go, yeah, I did 50 years. So you win, the boxer wins in the gym, not in the arena. And so most people go in the arena and try to win, but the winners actually win outside the arena, and then they go in the arena and they've already won. So you have to set your mind up to be in the proper consciousness to chant japa. And if you start in the wrong mindset, it doesn't work. And many of us just start in the wrong mindset. We just pick up our beads and start chanting and start yawning and start getting distracted. You ever get distracted when you chant japa? That ever happened to you? It's programmed. It's a samskara. We have all these bad japa samskaras. So the affirmations is like to counteract those samskaras, to take us deeper, right? It's pretty heavy. In level 2 or 3 of the japa retreat, I'm going to talk more about the programming. It's pretty scary when you study programming and how deeply we're programmed. We're programmed so deeply we can make ourselves sick or we can heal ourselves that deeply. It's the mind-body connection is so deep. And so next time you chant japa, be aware of your body and see what it's doing. And if you see a lowering of energy, that's been programmed in there from bad japa experiences, from distracted japa, from difficult japa. It's interesting to note that. So I say, before you chant japa, you should say, I love to chant. You should change the energy. I get to chant, I want to chant, I love to chant. Change the energy. Okay. You have one more question? Or this is like Ravana's head. Every question I answer, 2 come up or something?
No, we're now getting to the end. So,
okay.
So one question from Rajneesh Prabhu is that how do we, overcome bad habits or old habits? Like it may be, a habit of eating onion and garlic, right? So what's the best way to overcome old habits?
Yeah. Best way to overcome the habit of eating onion and garlic is hing. They say that you don't give up an old habit, you replace it with a new habit. So your new habit is hing, right? One of the things that Prabhupada said, which is really important for us, when new people were coming to Krishna consciousness in the West, Prabhupada said, don't force them to perform austerity. He said, just teach them Krishna consciousness, and they will want to do the austerity once they understand it. So, if you want to give up an old habit, you have to have good reasons, right? What's wrong with onions and garlic? I like the way they taste. Actually, they're healthy, Everybody eats them. So you've got all the reasons to eat them. That's going to be difficult if you want to give them up. You say, no, Prabhu, it has a tamasic effect on the mind. It has a passionate effect on the body. We want to be in sattva gun. We want to live a sattvic lifestyle. If we're engaged in tamasic activities, it's counteractive, counterproductive, on and on and on. And you go, oh, now I understand. So sometimes to break a habit, you need more knowledge. And then the knowledge becomes the impetus to do it. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was so bad. I could actually get you all, if you gave me 15 minutes, I could get you all to stop eating sugar for the rest of your life. If I white refined sugar, if I explained what it's doing to your body, if you look at it, you would run away. I'm not going to do that now, but I could do that. I could get you to basically stop doing anything if that thing you're doing is bad for you, and I could explain in minute detail how it's bad. So sometimes to overcome a bad habit, you need to really understand how bad it is for you. Like the depths of the dirt of that. So that's something I would suggest for onions or garlic or anything. Understand why it's bad and understand the benefits of not doing it or replacing it with hing. Hing is your savior for all you onion. And we can start a 12-step program for people who can't give up onions and garlic. And the way the 12-step program is like, Krishna, help me. I can't do this. I'm eating onions and garlic since I was in the womb. help me overcome this. And I turn it over to Krishna and say, I can't do it myself. So that's the other process. You turn it over to Krishna. Krishna, help me. I can't do it. Only by your strength I can do it. And Krishna will help you. For sure. And if you don't believe me, try it. You can try it with tea, onions, garlic, not getting up early, following any other principles. Just turn it over to Krishna. Say, I can't do this. I need your help. See what happens.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So I'm sorry. I think there are another couple of questions and we'll have to stop here because by the time, as Prabhuji answers those, another two will come. So this will go on and on. So in the interest of time, we would like to, stop the questions now. And I just want to thank, Prabhuji on behalf of, ISKCON Gurugram for sharing such amazing insights. Personally, for me, it seemed like in my good old days, where actually my first year in Austin, Prabhuji's house was just only like 200 meters away from my dorm. So all my free time practically I spent in Prabhuji's house, so today you've really shared some wonderful points about, starting with the essence of the essence, right? Cooperation, which is such a big challenge for most of us. And there is so much to learn and mature in that area, and you've reminded us of a very, very essential concern for the future, right? That how we really need to prepare our consciousness so we can become more tolerant and we can become more mature in our dealings and more sensitive with others. So even when there are differences, we can still work together and take the mission forward. And then you've also reminded us on how we should improve our sadhana, right? And serve in different capacities like book distribution, and also try to advance in Krishna consciousness, because that's what would please any spiritual master. And in the end, you mentioned another two very nice points about boiling our milk or boiling the milk and taking care of especially the devotees who've joined, and ensuring that all of us who are joining the movement, we are progressing, we're taken care of, right? And we are growing as a family in a much more mature and cooperative way. And the last thing you said is that we should be happy, right? And that's such an important thing. Like Prabhupada said that, when he was asked to describe a devotee, he said, a devotee is happy. So thank you for reminding us that we should happily do our, devotional service, and Krishna consciousness at all stages. There's so much to be grateful for. There's so much inner peace and happiness that we all get, even in our initial stages. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for giving this enlightening session. And I'm sure we would love to, have you again whenever your time permits. And we want to thank Giriraj Prabhu for organizing and coordinating this session. So I've just been the big talker, but actual work has been done by Giriraj Prabhu. So thank you very much, Prabhuji. If you just like to say thanks to Prabhuji at the end.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so very much.
Radhe Gaur Prabhu, you want to just say thanks to Prabhuji?
Yeah, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji, for your wonderful association. And Prabhuji, I really like the answer that you gave, that and the parameters of how we can understand that how our love for Krishna is increasing. And like to implement all the principles that you have taught us today in my day-to-day life, and also would like to be there in the Japa retreat, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Because yeah, it actually, Prabhuji, hampers a lot now, because when there is so many services in the temple, the thing that comes in the mind that my love for Krishna is reflecting in my services, so I can compromise all the sadhana and all these things. So really thankful to you for that wonderful point, Prabhuji. And we also request you, Prabhuji, to whenever you come here in Delhi or India, please come here in Gurugram also. And our temple president, His Grace Rambad Prabhuji, was sharing that you often visited Delhi temple, I think 10 years back. So he was mentioning that once he was serving you personally, and he asked you that when we chant 8 rounds, first 8 rounds, they are very, very effective. And the rest 8 rounds, it becomes so hustle, and our focus just distracted and all. So you answered very nicely, and he was just sharing. But somehow or other today he was unable to present here because he's traveling. So he said that please remind Prabhuji about that answer. And he said that it is still helping him a lot. So
what did I say?
I don't know, Prabhuji, whatever he answered, he tells that Prabhuji answered very appropriately, and it is helping me a lot.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
You can answer us, Prabhuji, on this question, Prabhuji.
I don't remember what I told him.
Now you must
That
have.
was the same thing Lord Chaitanya said, he said, can you recite that Atmarama verse? I said, I don't remember what I said. Can you recite what you recited to Sarvabhauma? I said, I'm a madman. He's a madman. I can't remember. Ask him what he said and let me know.
Sure.
And also, brahmacharis can come for free to the.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
It's only a few hundred rupees anyway, but you come for free, all the brahmacharis. So all your temple brahmacharis can attend.
Hari bol. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. We'll
Okay.
surely be there.
Hare Krishna to all of you.
Please bless all of us, and everyone, please express our wholehearted gratitude again by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra as a token of our gratitude to Prabhuji. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. So आप सब लोगों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.